Silence shifts the balance of power the moment it appears. When conversation stops unexpectedly, the person who speaks first typically reveals more than they intended, while the person who remains quiet gains information and psychological advantage without effort. This transfer occurs because humans interpret silence as intentional. Even when it happens accidentally, the silent person appears to be withholding information, making a strategic decision, or demonstrating comfort with uncertainty that others find unnerving. Watch how this unfolds in business negotiations. The negotiator who presents their offer then remains silent, forces the counterpart to fill the void, often revealing additional information, making concessions, or showing emotional responses that provide strategic advantage. The counterpart experiences psychological pressure during silence because they cannot determine what the quiet person is thinking. This uncertainty creates anxiety that often leads to verbal responses designed to reduce tension rather than advance negotiating position. The negotiator who maintains silence after presenting terms demonstrates comfort with uncertainty while gathering information about the counterpart's actual priorities, flexibility, and emotional state without revealing their own position. Professional meetings demonstrate how silence affects authority distribution and decision-making processes. When difficult questions are asked, the person who remains silent while others rush to respond typically appears more thoughtful and credible. The silent individual allows others to reveal their positions, knowledge gaps, or emotional reactions, while maintaining the option to respond strategically after gathering information from other participants' responses. Meanwhile, those who fill silence immediately often appear anxious or unprepared, reducing their credibility even when their content is accurate or valuable to the discussion. Romantic relationship dynamics reveal how silence affects emotional power and conversation control. The partner who responds immediately to every statement, question, or accusation typically finds themselves in reactive positions throughout relationship discussions. Their immediate responses prevent them from gathering information about their partner's actual concerns while potentially revealing emotional vulnerabilities that can be exploited during future conflicts. The partner who uses strategic silence creates space for their counterpart to clarify their real issues, express deeper emotions, or reveal motivations that might not emerge during rapid conversational exchanges. Job interview situations show how silence affects candidate evaluation and interviewer perception. Candidates who fill every pause with additional information often appear nervous or unprepared, even when their qualifications are superior. Their discomfort with silence suggests inability to handle pressure situations or uncertainty that might arise in professional contexts requiring composure under stress. Candidates who maintain comfortable silence after answering questions demonstrate confidence in their responses while allowing interviewers to process information and formulate follow-up questions naturally. Sales environments demonstrate how silence affects customer psychology and purchasing decisions. Salespeople who continue talking after presenting prices or proposals typically reduce their negotiating power while revealing desperation for sales closure. Their inability to remain quiet suggests that they fear customer rejection and may be willing to offer additional concessions to avoid losing the opportunity. Salespeople who present offers, then remain silent, create psychological pressure that often leads customers to justify their decision-making process aloud, revealing budget constraints, decision-making authority, or purchase motivations. Therapeutic relationships reveal how silence affects client progress and session dynamics. Therapists who fill every pause with questions, interpretations, or guidance typically slow client self-discovery while reducing therapeutic effectiveness. Their discomfort with silence prevents clients from processing emotions, developing insights, or revealing information that emerges naturally during reflective moments rather than direct questioning. Therapists who maintain comfortable silence create space for clients to explore their thoughts more deeply while demonstrating comfort with emotional processing that enhances therapeutic alliance. Legal depositions and courtroom proceedings show how silence affects witness credibility and case strategy. Attorneys who ask questions then immediately follow up without allowing response time typically gather less useful information while appearing impatient. Their inability to wait for complete answers suggests anxiety about case strength, while preventing witnesses from providing detailed responses that might contain valuable information. Attorneys who ask questions then remain silent often receive more comprehensive answers while observing witness behavior that provides insights about credibility, knowledge, or emotional state. Parenting contexts demonstrate how silence affects child behavior and family authority dynamics. Parents who immediately respond to every child's statement, request, or emotional outburst typically encourage increased child demands while reducing parental authority. Their constant verbal engagement teaches children that emotional escalation produces immediate parental attention while preventing children from developing self-soothing or problem-solving capabilities. Parents who use strategic silence after setting boundaries or expectations create space for children to process information while demonstrating that parental decisions are final rather than negotiable. Crisis management situations reveal how leadership silence affects stakeholder confidence. Leaders who immediately respond to every criticism typically appear reactive while potentially providing information that damages organizational interests. Team leadership environments show how silence affects group dynamics. Team leaders who fill every pause with additional instructions typically reduce team member participation while appearing micromanagerial. Social gathering dynamics reveal how silence affects group positioning. The person who fills every conversational pause with comments typically occupies lower social status while appearing desperate for group attention. Investment advisory relationships demonstrate how advisor silence affects client confidence. Financial advisors who immediately respond to every client concern typically increase client anxiety while appearing uncertain about market conditions. Academic discussions show how professor silence affects student engagement. Professors who immediately respond to student questions typically reduce student critical thinking while appearing uncertain about student capabilities. Customer service interactions reveal how representative silence affects customer satisfaction. Service representatives who immediately respond to every customer complaint typically escalate customer emotions while appearing defensive about company policies. Political debate environments show how candidate silence affects voter perception. Political candidates who respond immediately to every accusation typically appear defensive while potentially providing information that damages campaign objectives. Executive board meetings demonstrate how director silence affects decision-making processes. Board members who immediately respond to every proposal typically reduce their influence while appearing anxious about board participation. Mediation sessions reveal how mediator silence affects dispute resolution. Mediators who immediately respond to every party statement typically reduce resolution effectiveness while appearing to take sides inadvertently. Professional coaching relationships show how coach silence affects client development. Coaches who immediately respond to every client insight typically slow client progress while reducing coaching effectiveness. Technology troubleshooting context demonstrate how technical silence affects problem resolution. Technical support personnel who immediately respond to every user description typically increase user frustration while appearing to guess rather than diagnose. Investment pitch presentations reveal how entrepreneur silence affects investor confidence. Entrepreneurs who immediately respond to every investor question typically appear defensive while potentially revealing business weaknesses inadvertently. The psychological mechanisms driving these patterns operate through uncertainty interpretation systems that evolved to assess social status and decision-making capability during group interactions where leadership qualities determined survival outcomes. Humans unconsciously interpret comfortable silence as confidence and uncomfortable silence as weakness, because historically leaders who could remain calm during uncertain situations typically made better decisions for group survival. These assessment systems persist in modern environments where silence often signals strategic thinking rather than uncertainty, but the evaluation mechanisms remain the same, creating opportunities for those who understand how silence affects perception. Understanding why silence alters power dynamics enables strategic approaches to influence building that leverage psychological pressure without verbal manipulation or aggressive tactics that might damage relationships. The individual who masters strategic silence can gather information while maintaining psychological advantage in competitive environments where being underestimated provides strategic benefit rather than disadvantage. This applies across professional advancement, relationship management, and any situation where information gathering affects outcomes more than immediate response or constant verbal engagement. The most effective approach involves developing comfort with uncertainty that allows natural silence to emerge during conversations rather than artificial silence that appears manipulative or uncomfortable. The person who uses silence strategically typically achieves better outcomes because they gather more information while revealing less, creating asymmetrical knowledge advantages that improve decision-making quality. Most importantly, they understand that silence functions as active communication rather than absence of communication, sending messages about confidence, competence, and strategic thinking that often prove more influential than verbal responses. The pattern emerges consistently. Those who remain comfortable with silence typically gain psychological advantage over those who feel compelled to fill quiet moments because silence creates information-gathering opportunities while demonstrating emotional regulation capabilities that others interpret as leadership qualities. The strategic individual learns to use silence as deliberate communication tool rather than avoiding silence as conversational failure, recognizing that strategic quiet often generates more influence than strategic speech in competitive environments where perception affects outcomes. International diplomatic negotiations demonstrate how negotiator silence affects treaty outcomes and national positioning. Diplomats who immediately respond to every proposal, provocation, or pressure tactic typically reveal negotiating positions while appearing anxious about international standing. Their inability to maintain silence during sensitive discussions prevents strategic assessment of counterpart positions while suggesting that immediate agreement matters more than optimal treaty terms. Diplomats who use strategic silence during negotiations create pressure for counterparts to reveal additional information while demonstrating that their positions are based on national interests rather than emotional reactions to international pressure. Real estate transactions show how agent silence affects property negotiations and sale outcomes. Real estate agents who immediately respond to every buyer objection, seller concern, or pricing question typically weaken their negotiating position while appearing desperate for transaction completion. Their discomfort with negotiations silence suggests commission pressure while preventing buyers and sellers from revealing their actual priorities, budgets, or flexibility regarding transaction terms. Agents who maintain strategic silence after presenting information create space for parties to process property values while demonstrating confidence in market knowledge that supports their professional recommendations. Emergency response coordination reveals how command silence affects crisis management and resource allocation effectiveness. Emergency coordinators who immediately respond to every media question, political pressure, or public concern typically lose strategic control while appearing overwhelmed by crisis complexity. Their inability to remain quiet during crisis pressure suggests panic while preventing careful assessment of resource needs that require strategic allocation rather than reactive distribution. Coordinators who maintain strategic silence during crisis evaluation gather accurate information about emergency requirements while demonstrating operational competence that maintains public confidence in emergency response capabilities. Wedding planning and event coordination contexts show how planner silence affects client decision-making and event success. Event planners who immediately respond to every client idea, concern, or change request typically create decision-making chaos while appearing uncertain. Their inability to pause during client discussions prevents full understanding of client vision while suggesting that immediate accommodation matters more than optimal event planning that requires strategic coordination. Planners who maintain strategic silence during client explanations gather complete information about event expectations while demonstrating professional confidence that guides clients towards successful event outcomes. Venture capital pitch meetings demonstrate how investor silence affects entrepreneur evaluation and funding decisions. Venture capitalists who immediately respond to every entrepreneur claim, projection, or business model explanation typically gather less useful information while appearing overeager for investment opportunities. Their inability to remain quiet during entrepreneur presentations prevents complete assessment of business viability, while suggesting that immediate feedback matters more than thorough due diligence evaluation. Investors who maintain strategic silence during presentations create space for entrepreneurs to reveal additional business information while demonstrating investment experience that evaluates opportunities thoroughly rather than reactively. Professional sports coaching situations reveal how coach silence affects athlete performance and team dynamics. Coaches who immediately respond to every athlete question, performance concern, or team issue typically reduce athlete self-reliance while appearing uncertain about coaching methodology. Their discomfort with practice silence suggests anxiety about athlete development, while preventing athletes from developing independent problem-solving capabilities that transfer to competitive situations requiring autonomous decision-making. Coaches who maintain strategic silence during athlete struggles create space for performance breakthrough while demonstrating confidence in training methods that develop competitive resilience rather than coaching dependence. Scientific research collaboration environments show how researcher silence affects project progress and academic relationships. Researchers who immediately respond to every colleague's suggestion, criticism, or methodological concern typically slow research progress while appearing defensive about research quality. Their inability to remain quiet during academic discussions prevents full consideration of research improvements while suggesting that immediate defense matters more than scientific accuracy, but requires thoughtful methodology evaluation. Researchers who maintain strategic silence during colleague feedback gather complete information about research concerns while demonstrating scientific confidence that incorporates valid criticism rather than defensively rejecting all suggestions. Corporate restructuring processes demonstrate how executive silence affects employee confidence and organizational stability. Executives who immediately respond to every employee concern, rumor, or restructuring question typically increase organizational anxiety while appearing uncertain about company direction. Their inability to remain quiet during restructuring uncertainty suggests leadership panic while preventing careful communication planning that addresses employee concerns without revealing sensitive strategic information. Executives who maintain strategic silence during restructuring planning create space for accurate information gathering while demonstrating leadership confidence that manages organizational change professionally rather than reactively. Investment banking client relationships show how banker silence affects deal negotiation and client satisfaction. Investment bankers who immediately respond to every client concern, market worry, or deal structure question typically reduce client confidence while appearing uncertain about financial expertise. Their discomfort with client silence suggests anxiety about deal closure while preventing clients from expressing complete concerns that require strategic rather than immediate responses. Bankers who maintain strategic silence during client discussions gather comprehensive information about deal requirements while demonstrating financial expertise that structures transactions optimally rather than quickly. Professional counseling sessions reveal how counselor silence affects client breakthrough. Counselors who immediately respond to every client revelation typically slow client development while appearing uncomfortable with emotional processing. Technology product development meetings show how engineer silence affects innovation. Engineers who immediately respond to every design suggestion typically reduce innovation potential while appearing defensive about technical decisions. Legal settlement negotiations demonstrate how attorney silence affects resolution outcomes. Attorneys who immediately respond to every settlement offer typically weaken their bargaining position while appearing anxious about case resolution. Executive recruitment processes show how candidate silence affects hiring decisions. Executive candidates who immediately respond to every interviewer question typically appear desperate while potentially revealing negotiating weaknesses. Corporate crisis communication situations reveal how spokespersons' silence affects public perception. Corporate spokespersons who immediately respond to every media question typically lose message control while appearing defensive. Understanding why silence alters power dynamics instantly requires recognizing that quiet moments create psychological pressure that often reveals more information than direct questioning, while demonstrating emotional regulation that others interpret as competence. This dynamic operates automatically because humans evolved to assess leadership capability through observing behavior during uncertain situations where emotional control often determined group survival during challenging circumstances. Modern environments often reward constant communication, but the underlying psychological assessment systems still evaluate silence as confidence signal, creating opportunities for strategic positioning that leverages natural human response patterns. The effective individual develops comfort with conversational uncertainty that allows strategic silence to emerge naturally rather than forcing artificial quiet that appears manipulative or uncomfortable to others. This approach typically produces better outcomes across competitive situations because silence provides information gathering advantages while demonstrating emotional regulation capabilities that enhance credibility and influence. The pattern remains consistent. Those who master strategic silence typically achieve superior results in negotiations, relationships, and professional contexts because they gather more information while revealing less, creating asymmetrical advantages that improve decision-making quality and strategic positioning.